I would like to welcome back to all of you the one, the only Connor Rebus.
Thank you so very much.
Back from the wild. Are you all healed up after that Garbrandt Almeida fight?
What do you mean?
I mean, I know that you couldn't be on the show last week because you maybe threw something out.
Oh, that's right. I pulled something.
Yeah, pulled something.
Yeah, pulled something while preparing for the Almeida fight, and yeah, I'm all better. I'm good. I'm great.
All right, I'm glad
I look well. I look well rested and relaxed. As you can see, that's what happens after you pull something.
It's true.
You can see I'm now in a new environment. I was moving into an apartment over the course of the end of last week while coming down with an illness and while trying to do scouting reports and previews and all kinds of stuff. So it's good to be back on the Vivisection, Zane. It's good to have this ritual back in place.
It is. I'm only a little bit sad that I guess I won't say we don't have. Never mind. No, we do. I was going to say that we don't have a trashy middleweight fight, but we do. We have a really trashy one.
It is a bummer I didn't get to talk about Kamosi Miranda because it ended up being everything I wanted it to be. Also, by the way, Collier Udo was a lot of fun as well.
Collier Udo was a shit ton of fun. Those trashy middleweights know how to throw down. Like,
always entertaining. One of the middleweight fights in this card is depressing, unfortunately, but we'll get to that later.
It's depressing, but not trashy.
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah. It's middleweight. I mean,
yeah, but still. So we got a lot of fights. This is a really kind of strange card. Like, there's a lot of name value. There's some really cool hot bouts. There's a lot of tough fights to pick, and then there's just some fucking weird shit with some guys that I have no clue what they're going to show up and do.
Yeah.
Which makes for a good time, makes for a fun card to discuss. We're going to jump right in at the bottom with absolutely one of those fights that I have no idea what either of these guys exactly is going to bring to the cage with them. Polo Reyes, Dong Young Kim, the Maestro, not to be confused with Stun Gun. Fights at the same gym, though, so God knows. Connor, why don't you lead us off talking about that fight?
This fight should be a lot of fun. I think it carries on a proud tradition of just having a slobber knocker in the curtain jerker fight on the Fight Pass prelims. Polo Reyes, very comfortable in exchanges, good combination puncher. Obviously needs a little work on his takedown defense, but he did look pretty good in that Cesar Arzamendia fight in his UFC debut as far as reacting once he'd been taken down. He had some of the Carlos Condit thing going on where, yeah, he can't stop the double leg, but he can hit a switch and use butterfly hooks and wall walk and counter you once you've taken him down. So that was okay. He talked a lot about using his wrestling more offensively too. I actually tend to think he'll probably be the more reliable wrestler in this matchup. Maestro is not a very good grappler. He's explosive and he's very gutsy. But his jiu-jitsu in particular is pretty underdeveloped. I have seen him look absolutely clueless with his back on the mat against several opponents. He is game, and he will throw down, and he's tough. We saw that in his fight with Dominick Steele, who, despite getting blown out of the water in his debut, Dominick Steele has shown himself to be a very tough, capable fighter in the UFC. He had a really close fight with Danny Roberts. But he also knocked Maestro down almost immediately and ended up knocking him out and hurt him several times in that fight. I kind of like Polo Reyes in this fight just because I think he has a little bit better with combination punching. I think he's very tough and durable. I think he's a powerful hitter. And I think if he needs to, he can probably out-grapple Maestro. But I think this is a fight where I would not be even surprised in the slightest to see either guy put the other guy to sleep.
Yeah, the big thing with Maestro, which is often kind of prototypical with a lot of the Asian fighters, I want to say Japanese, but frankly, it's a lot of the Chinese and Korean
and
fighters.
Japanese boxers are warriors in very much the same way.
Yeah, a lot of, or he's got a very prototypical style in that everything he does is focused on offense.
Yeah.
He's actually an all-right offensive wrestler and top position grappler, and he's an all-right, and he's a good, solid combination boxer in the pocket, but it's all offensively focused. There is no thought to defense. Like you say, he can be taken down. He's not good off his back. He's not good. He doesn't move well to slip strikes or defend them. He's just wide open. And the question to me is Polo Reyes varied enough to take advantage of that, or deep enough technically to take advantage of it? Because I think that Reyes is the better developing talent. He's got a better basic set of tools going. But what I saw in that Arzamendia fight is that he's also he's good at, like you say, he's good at getting back to his feet. He's good at scrambling. But when he's standing and striking, he is almost purely a boxer. Like, his only focus is on punching.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, like, Dong Hyun Kim got dropped by, what's his name? Just
Steele?
Dominick Steele. But Steele is also way, way bigger than Dong Hyun Kim. And there was a serious power differential going on there. I'm going to, I don't know. I feel like I should pick Polo Reyes because the tough Latin America guys constantly overperform. And I want to pick him, but I'm leaning towards Dong Hyun Kim just because I think he's got enough variation in his game to make Reyes pay for not being a deep technical fighter yet, for not having a lot of variation. He's got enough different things he can do, kicking, boxing, hitting takedowns, things like that, that I think he can make Reyes pay in a way that Arzamendia couldn't, while Arzamendia was getting these easy takedowns and landing some strikes that he couldn't really put much steam behind.
Sure.
But yeah, I wouldn't jump either way. The odds on this are dead even. Polo Reyes is minus 106 up to minus 115. Dong Hyun Kim is minus 105 up to minus 115. So they are literally absolutely even. And I can't find any great reason to separate them.
No.
That brings us to our action middleweight hot bout, the people's main event, second fight on the Fight Pass prelim. So if all you're doing is watching the Fight Pass card, you will be watching the people's main event. Kevin Casey, Elvis Mutapcic, the
Battle of the Kings.
Yeah, Battle of the Kings. You know that Joe Silva saw that and did that on purpose. There's zero question. And it's the BJJ guy with suspect gas tank against the blue-collar scrapper. So
yeah, one of three kings on this card, by the way, because King Bobby Green is on the main card.
That's right. So we are king heavy on this UFC 199 card.
All of these men very deserving of that nickname. All of them clearly the best in their respective divisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So in any weird, scrappy middleweight fight, there's always a chance of some weird shit happening. There's always different things floating around in the ether, different kingdoms at play, different legacies to uphold. But I think generally the blue collar scrappers tend to beat the BJJ guys with suspect gas tanks. They especially tend to when they're Elvis Mutapcic, like, his weakness is not takedown defense.
No.
His weakness tends to be that he can get thrown. He can get convinced not to throw punches, basically.
Yeah. That's
his problem, is that fighters can convince him that he should not generate offense. Kevin Casey, he has that ability early, but he so obviously flags and so quickly that it's really hard to see Mutapcic getting thrown for more than a round and not realizing that he can just battle his way back into this fight. So I got to take Mutapcic by decision.
Yeah, I think Elvis's problem is that he's a good defensive fighter who ends up making himself look like a not very good defensive fighter because he waits so much, where he's so determined to slip something you offer him and go for the counter that he doesn't realize how much easier that task would become if maybe he made you throw something that he wanted you to throw, or if he gave you some looks, gave you some false openings to bite on. He just waits. Despite that, he's not easy to hit clean for a guy like Kevin Casey, who's fairly predictable. Granted, Casey is pretty powerful early. He's fairly explosive in that first round. But the thing with Kevin Casey, I did the round table yesterday. I talked about this. I think I talked about this fight with Pat. Who knows? It's a middleweight fight, so I probably did. I've tried to dance around it, but there's a lot of quit in Kevin Casey. Like just to call a spade, the guy does not fight through adversity well. Elvis Mutapcic can take a beating and keep on going. Yes, it maybe changes the way that he fights, but Kevin Casey, like if he gets tired, if he gets hit clean, if he gets staggered, if he gets poked in the eye, he does not recover from those things the way you would like to see a fighter recover from those things. Adversity takes all the fight out of him. And it's just hard to rely on a guy like that against somebody who is a very game journeyman in Elvis Mutapcic. So I'm going with Mutapcic. I think he may very well have a few difficulties in the first round, like many of Kevin Casey's opponents, but I don't see Kevin Casey able to win 2 rounds against him.
Yeah, I mean, Mutapcic has never been finished even against better opposition, which I would argue that Jesse Taylor is.
I think he'll even have the advantage on the ground because he's a willing takedown artist and a good grappler, and Kevin Casey's only a pretty good grappler for a round. So
Mutapcic, like, he's not bad anywhere. It's just that he and honestly, I think his willingness to strike has gotten better, and it just took a big step back when he faced Frantimar Barbosa, who was just so obviously much larger than him, and it was just sort of like, oh shit, now I have to face. He was very obviously afraid of getting hit really hard and getting taken down, even though he stuffed almost every takedown.
That was one of those fights where it was difficult to actually predict until you saw the 2 men in the cage how big the size difference would be, and it was marked. It was pretty dramatic.
So beyond that, I think it's a pretty easy call for Mutapcic. And Mutapcic is the favorite, -140 to -160. Kevin Casey +135 down to +110. Not saying that Mutapcic at -140 might be a good pick, but Kevin Casey does not tend to win a lot of UFC fights.
Nope.
He just doesn't. Like, that's kind of a thing, he's
a regional circuit killer. Like, you give Kevin Casey a guy who's not that experienced or a guy who's not very good defensively, he will. The last time he got cut from the UFC, he went on like a string of 4 or 5 first-round wins, 3 first-round wins in a row after he lost to Josh Salmon. Then he comes back and, he's still Kevin Casey.
Yep. So it's I can understand why it's close because Mutapcic did not impress. I feel like he's got this. That brings us to a light heavyweight bout that feels a bit like a middleweight bout, or would if there were enough specialty in either fighter. Jonathan Wilson versus Luis Henrique da Silva. And Connor, I'm expecting a thoroughly exacting breakdown of the technical aspects of this fight.
You know what I learned? I think the most interesting thing about this fight is I learned this from Jordan Breen. Is that for years, do you know what Luis Henrique da Silva's nickname was on the Fight Finder and on various other platforms?
Frankenstein or Frank Waston?
It was Frank Waston Jr.
Yep.
Because I think where he's from, that's how they thought Frankenstein was spelled.
You know what? I just this second saying it out loud realized that was why he was called Frank Waston.
Yeah, because it's like Frank Westein. It's like a
Frank
horribly
Westein,
it's a horribly butchered version of Frankenstein.
That's hilarious.
Frank Waston.
I don't know how I totally missed that. Because I wrote up a whole welcome to the UFC thing on him. Yeah, and I was like, Luis Henrique Frank Waston Jr. was what he was known as, and I knew his nickname was Frankenstein, and it never intersected for me that he would be called Frank Waston. I hope pronounced Frankenstein.
I hope he finds success in the UFC because I need there to be a successful light heavyweight named Frank Waston Jr. I need that to be a thing. As silly as that nickname is, that is as silly as Luis Enrique de Silva's style is. He is one of the trademark Brazilian jungle warriors. He is just like this insane, brawling madman. He doesn't have a lot of clean technique in anything that he does. He's easy to hit, but he just doesn't go away. He had, like Jonathan Wilson, who came out of the Explode Fight series, Luis Enrique de Silva's record is not really reliable. He doesn't have a ton of great wins, but his ridiculous style was still enough to give him a knockout victory over a UFC vet, Ildemar Alcantara, which is why he's in the UFC right now.
He got shit kicked in that fight.
Yeah, he was getting destroyed.
He got shit kicked for a round and then came back and knocked out
He was clearly losing the second round too, and then he lands one gigantic winging left hand and wins it. And that's actually a pretty dangerous trait for a guy to have. And Jonathan Wilson is not the most reliable guy to bet on going into a fight against that type of fighter. He doesn't have a ton of reliable experience of his own. His best win is a win over Chris Dempsey, who really washed out of the UFC in dramatic style and got blown out of the water by Jonathan Wilson in the first round. So
it's effectively the only pro fight of Jonathan Wilson's career.
More or less, yeah. So two guys with similar records. I think I like Jonathan Wilson for two reasons. One, he's significantly faster than Luis Enrique de Silva. He covers distance really quickly. He throws straight punches and hard kicks as well. And two, he will turn into a wrestler if he gets into trouble. And that is the thing that Luis Enrique de Silva struggled the most with against Ildemar Alcantara. Wilson is strong. He will grind an opponent against the fence and drag them down. And I think that is enough of a thing to give him an edge. But it's one of those things where it's like, how can I pick Luis Enrique de Silva over somebody? That's really the reason I'm not picking him, because I can totally see him going through 2 rounds of punishment and missing all these shots and landing once and putting Jonathan Wilson away. Both guys hit hard. Both guys very tough. So Jonathan Wilson with reservations.
Yeah, the other thing I would say in Wilson's favor is that Millennia MMA while they tend to like to put their guys through a can-crushing early career, that tends to just seem to be how they funnel their fighters, is go through Gladiator Challenge and Explode and then jump into the deeper waters. They tend to do, like, those fighters get a pretty good fundamental skill set as they go. Like,
who else are Millennia fighters? It's
So it's Lorenz Larkin,
Willie Gates.
What's his name? Well, of course, Willie Gates used to trade Daryl Montague. And then they also had what's his name? He was in the UFC briefly, and they let him go. And I actually think it was a little bit of a mistake. Damn it!
I'll try and look for it. You can keep going.
Yeah, but they also have Kar Kanyan and Sadawad, and it's a really big, good camp that produces a lot of elite level, upper level veteran talent. They just tend to go through can crushing. Like, that's their path that they like to do, is just, okay, go to Explode and get a pretty record, and then we'll start matching you up. And so my expectations for Jonathan Wilson on that point then are that he should reasonably improve and become a reasonably more technical fighter as he goes, even with a crappy record under his belt. So, yeah, I mean, he's got a big, tough, aggressive opponent in front of him. But
was it Joe Merritt?
Joe Merritt, that's the guy who was like the rawest level of building a fundamental skill set, but a very obviously good athlete.
But they've got a pretty good track record despite the individual records of their fighters not being that great.
Yep. So I think that I expect improvement out of Wilson, and I do not expect improvement out of Frankenstein unless he moves to a different camp.
Can they please match up Luis Enrique de Silva and Leonardo Guimarães after this fight? Because I need to see those two guys fight.
Yes. I think it should be a a division jumping round robin between Marcelo Guimaraes, Luis Enrique da Silva, and Luis Enrique da Silva. The heavyweight, KLB.
Oh, yeah. I would love that. Also, Leonardo Guimaraes has fought heavyweight, so he's happy with it. He'll do it.
Yeah, so I think you put him in a heavyweight round robin, and you've got yourself a real contest.
Go for it.
All right, odds on this fight. Jonathan Wilson is the favorite, minus 200 to minus 240. Luis Enrique da Silva plus 196 to plus 160. Frankly, at plus 196, you might drop $5 on Luis Enrique Frankenstein because, like, there's no reason Jonathan Wilson should be a minus 225 favorite or minus 230.
No,
like he has one real fight in his whole career, and it's over one of the least durable UFC pickups in the last 5 years.
I'm telling you, he's not as good as Guimaraes, but like I was almost right making what was essentially a chance pick on Guimaraes over Anthony Smith, and that the same thing is even more likely to happen against Jonathan Wilson because he's not as good as Anthony Smith.
Not half as good. Anthony Smith has had like 8 years of working on his striking and has become a reasonably decent power striker who still falls apart. He's very much part of the new breed that Phil set out of good kickboxers who aren't.
Brandon Thatch, Anthony Smith. Yeah, we got a few of those.
We do.
Kickboxers who aren't. It's a good one.
I can't remember the exact thing, but it's very much like Uriah Hall being their king, obviously.
Sure. Yeah, it's an archetype. It's a thing.
It is. And that brings us to the Fight Pass main event. Sean Strickland, Tom Breese. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Definitely. I gotta say, I was watching some tape on this, and I may have to pick Sean Strickland. Like, I really want Tom Breese to win this a lot. I think he's got a higher ceiling. I think he's building a more dangerous game. I think that Strickland has kind of plateaued, and I'm not sure when and where and how the improvements in Strickland's game are going to come. It may be that things just slowly kind of improve and coalesce into a decent mid-card fighter because welterweight is so deep that you can't really be OSP at welterweight.
Yep.
But he may still be good enough to beat Breese right now. The biggest reason I'm kind of feeling that is the absolute ease with which Kaita Nakamura took Tom Breese down and cut through his guard early in that fight. Breese was able to rotate out of it and go to a heel hook, but that's partially because Kaita Nakamura is much more of a position-favoring lockdown grappler than somebody like Strickland is, who is very much a positionally aggressive, flowing grappler like Breese on the mat. Both guys tend to be somewhat low output, cautious kickboxers, Strickland being much more defensive, but I can easily see this being a lot of just kind of looking at each other on the feet because they're both big, tall guys. They both like to counter. Mm-hmm. And Strickland is incredibly defense first as a striker.
Yes. Remember that Luke Barnett fight.
Yep. The Luke Barnett fight especially, and the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight where, because Ponzinibbio is actually a pretty dangerous, well put together combination kickboxer, Ponzinibbio was able to just take that and outwork him.
Yep.
But Breese is not yet that dangerous combination striker. And so I could see this being a slow fight of them looking at each other. And then if it gets into a grappling match, I think Strickland might have the advantage. Like he is more positionally dominant and polished. Breese is craftier, I think, but I don't trust him to be able to hit the same sweeps and do the same work that he did against Nakamura. Like I think Strickland is tougher on the mat. And
You think
I'm
so?
obviously
Than
Nakamura
Keitaro?
is a very. Hmm?
You think he's better than Keitaro on the ground?
I don't know that he's better. I think that he has a style that is more tuned to stopping Tom Breese.
Hmm. He's definitely
I
a little
think,
meaner.
yeah, I think Keitaro is better in that, like, you know, control, force you into a bad position, and then submit you kind of way that Breeze was able to use his athleticism and his, explosive ability to just kind of move through. But I think that Strickland is much more like a match you explosive burst for explosive burst kind of thing. And I could see him staying with Breeze. And, Keitaro then was totally outclassed on the feet in a way that really made him have to rely on his grappling. And I don't know that Strickland will be as outclassed. So I don't want to pick against Tom Breeze, but I'm gonna. All right.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're giving Strickland his due because this is one of those. I can hear myself coming through your mic for some reason.
Oh, I'll mute.
Sorry about that. I'm glad to hear you giving Strickland his due because I think even though the odds in this fight are pretty close, I get the sense that people in the know in the MMA community feel like because Breeze is what they would have said in old school boxing times, the coming man. He is like the guy who has great things ahead of him, and Sean Strickland probably doesn't. Last time we talked about Sean Strickland on the Vivisection, I kind of said I think he's so young he could definitely make improvements. You said probably never like a top 5, but definitely top 10, top 15 type welterweight. I've kind of warmed to that idea without it really dampening my idea of Sean Strickland's ceiling. I think Sean Strickland is kind of a Jorge Masvidal. He is like a crafty fighter who you are not going to put Sean Strickland away. You are not going to convince him he's losing a fight, and he will always be there to find openings. He won't necessarily be winning rounds. And I think Tom Breeze is probably, especially coming out of TriStar, a lot more focused on being a consistent round-winning kind of fighter. He's going to do more of the right things. I think that's kind of what makes me favor Tom Breeze. I think he'll come into this. Strickland's going to be waiting on him. He's going to have a guy who is as big as him, who probably hits as hard as him and has some more options in terms of the targets he attacks and the types of strikes he likes to throw, as well as the fact that Breeze will probably look to engage on the ground. I think it's going to shut Strickland down a bit. Just not that it makes him less dangerous, but in a way that makes where Strickland will be waiting and picking things off and not necessarily doing enough to win the rounds. So I'm a big fan of Sean Strickland. I really like his weird sort of style. I think he would be an amazingly successful fighter if it was like London prize ring rules at the turn of the 18th century. He'd be a great bare knuckle fighter in a knockout only match that had unlimited rounds. He'd do great in that kind of context. But in a 3-round fight with another top prospect, I have trouble favoring him. So I think it deserves to be a pick'em fight. I think Strickland deserves his due here, but I'm going to go with Tom Breeze.
Yeah, normally I would go with Breeze. I think my fear is just that Breeze gets outworked on the ground, that he won't rely on his striking enough to pick up rounds that way. And when he tries to engage Strickland or lets Strickland engage him on the ground, he's going to find himself being outworked there.
Yeah.
Because, there are two sides to this, too. We just saw Strickland beat a good athlete from TriStar.
Yeah, but there's something wrong with Alex Garcia.
I know. But the flip side of that is that Breeze has somebody who can tell him how Strickland fights.
Sure.
But when Strickland got top position in that Alex Garcia fight, like Garcia shot in on him and Strickland just like whipped him to the ground and was on top, Strickland did work. Like,
he is dangerous ground and pound. He's got some of that Neil Magny thing. Like, he's so long and tall that if he gets in your half guard and postures up, he is just going to drop straight punches on your jaw that don't feel like most fighters your size,
Yeah. And that's where the difference between a fight, like between Breeze Keitaro and Breeze Strickland comes in for me, is that Keitaro is not that kind of guy. Keitaro is just going to lock you down and try and wait for you to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that Strickland is going to be able to do a lot more against Breese on the ground, and it makes me worried about Breese in this fight. Like I see the ground battle giving him too much trouble.
I definitely see the tactical openings for Strickland. I just have trouble seeing him being keen enough to jump on those opportunities. That's been his problem.
Yeah. No, Strickland, he does fit right into, and like, I'm glad you brought up Masvidal, is I think there's a real thing that happens when fighters start as young as Strickland and Masvidal did in their teens, where they kind of, like, they fight a lot longer than most fighters. They fight for like 14, 15 years, but they never quite break, like, they're never quite able to put it together because
I think it makes a lot of sense. You grow up fighting like grown-ass men who you know can hurt you a lot more easily. You can hurt them. You're going to turn into a pretty effective survivalist. If you last that long, it's going to be because you know how to survive. But like Phil McKenzie was saying this in BE comments last week, maybe Heavy Hands comments or something, and he was saying that guys like Jorge Masvidal, because of that, he theorized that they see things differently. They see exchanges differently. They're super tacticians. Like everything is about winning the exchanges, and their concept of what a win is even different from other fighters. Like when Jorge Masvidal gets hit in the chin and feels okay, he feels like he's won that exchange. He looks, he's like, you didn't hurt me. I won because I survived. And Strickland can be the same way. Like Strickland spent that whole Luke Barnett fight. That was a fight that it felt like he could have easily taken over if he'd thrown some punches, but he was so content to like be proud of himself for stopping everything Barnett was throwing at him that he got nothing done. And it's tough to get a guy like that to rearrange his perceptions of what victory actually looks like, you know.
I also think it's because a lot of times if you're going to be a kid in an MMA gym, you're probably not coming up through a big elite camp. Like you're coming up through, you know, a local gym, a gym that maybe, like if you're Sage Northcutt, your garage, you know, like a gym that your parents are like ferrying you between a few different coaches kind of thing. And so you spend all this time working, you know, 5 or 6 years working out of that kind of circumstance. And so skill-wise, you just kind of hit this plateau. Like you may still have room to physically develop, but you've set your style at a level that is below elite.
It's like a true journeyman, like not a journeyman who is a journeyman who travels and can fight anybody and will comport himself well or at least be difficult to put away no matter who you put him against. These are the true journeymen.
All right, that brings us to the odds. Tom Breese is favored -130 to -149. Sean Strickland +126 to +110. I have no argument with, or to +100. I've got no argument with that.
I was shocked to see that Strickland was actually a minor favorite last week.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really close fight between, you know, like I said, I think the long-term ceiling is higher for Breeze, but this is a huge test. Like, big, tough fighters like Strickland are really difficult for young prospects to beat. So, that brings us to Cole Miller, Alex Caceres. I believe it's you. Yeah.
It's amazing that this fight ends up being pretty fun and exciting because it was supposed to be BJ Penn versus Dennis Seaver. And this is so much better than that. This is way better. Like, even I don't want to watch any of these three guys beat up BJ Penn. I don't want to see BJ Penn do his weird tippy-toe ballerina stance while he gets hit in the face. That wasn't fun last time. I don't think it'll be any more fun this time. And I guess, like, at this point, what are you going to do with Alex Caceres? Just throw him in there against some other journeyman and see what happens. I think Caceres did get a really tough schedule for a few years there. Like, fighting, who did he fight that 3-fight losing streak? The easiest guy he fought was Masanori Kanehara. And that's not an easy fight. That's a very tough opponent. I don't know why Kanehara is not in the UFC anymore because he's very solid. And then Francisco Rivera, Urijah Faber, and he did well in the Faber fight as well. But it's hard to pick him over Cole Miller. Cole Miller is absolutely, his skill set is absolutely not represented by his record. He's a very tough fighter. He's He's very dangerous from the range that Caceres prefers, and I think that's the real problem here, is that on the feet, Caceres is going to want to box from distance, and Miller has had trouble when guys get in his face and don't give him space to work his jab and his right hand and his kicks, and Caceres is probably not going to do that. And even if he does, Caceres is very hittable, very, very hittable. He's defensively liable just about anywhere the fight goes, and so I have trouble seeing him consistently fighting Miller at range without eating kicks to the body and eating long, straight 1-2s. And then on the ground, there are not very many guys in the featherweight division I would favor to tangle with Cole Miller for long. And because Caceres is such an aggressive grappler, he's not a control-oriented grappler in the first place, he's going to be leaving limbs out there. He's going to leave his neck out there. I think Cole Miller is better than most at snatching up those kinds of opportunities. So I really think the two places where Alex Caceres gets a lot of his wins are kind of the two places where Cole Miller is best. And it's hard to count a guy like Caceres out entirely. He has that Ricardo Lamas thing going on. He is a very opportunistic fighter. He's always dangerous, but it's hard to count him out, but it's hard to count on him as well. So I like Cole Miller by submission.
I will say that I do actually think that, especially watching that Jim Ehlers fight, I do have some concerns about Cole Miller's striking.
It's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect.
I think there's this weird thing where, like, he's not comfortable leading or countering, but he's best when he's countering. He's just, like, he's not comfortable with either role. Like, when Cole Miller leads, he usually gets hit. Like, he'll, like, throw out a long punch, and then he'll get cracked really hard on the return.
Yeah.
And when he's getting hit, he doesn't always want to counter, but when he can actually make himself counter, that's when he lands his best shots.
He fights like a long and tall guy. Like, he's not comfortable when you're rushing at him. He's not comfortable leading because it takes so much effort to stop his noodly arms from extending. Yeah. He's like, it's like, this is a comparison that is absolutely not fair because Cole Miller's not this good, but if you watch Vladimir Klitschko fight, it's the same thing. Like, for a top heavyweight, Vladimir Klitschko often looks very ungainly and very awkward when he fights. So Cole Miller has all of those completely stereotypical long and tall fighter problems on the feet.
And so when I see, like, with Caceres and his striking, he is very open to being hit, and that's always going to be a problem. But it's not like Cole Miller's a knockout puncher. He's not.
He's got a lot of submissions off of knockdowns.
He's got a lot of submissions off of knockdowns. So it's not. I'm not saying he can't hurt him, but I would be surprised if Cole Miller actually just, like, really hurt him bad.
Yeah, he's not just going to put his lights out.
Yeah, but Caceres is much, like, his striking game is much better defined and I think it's defined in a way that could actually beat Cole Miller. In that, like, I was watching that Ehlers fight, and a lot of what I saw is Ehlers was kicking a lot on the outside and then countering Miller when Miller was forced to lead. And that's really what Caceres likes to do. He likes to throw a lot of kicks at range, and then when you try to come in on him, he'll throw a really sharp counter hook. And he can still get hit a lot because he thinks he's defensively a lot safer than he is. He tends to just kind of float around at the edge and think, oh, you can't hit me, and then he'll get, like, cracked with a head kick or something. Yeah. But I think that there's a real chance that Caceres could outstrike Cole Miller. And then the question comes on the ground where Caceres has been submitted a lot and Miller has never been submitted. Yeah. So I want to take Caceres because I do think he has the advantage in that striking battle, but it's not like Caceres is a finishing striker, so he's likely to end up on the ground at some point, and where his grappling style really does leave him open to getting submitted by Cole Miller. So I'll pick Miller by submission, but I'm not happy about it because I do actually think that Caceres has the tools to beat him if he can just keep it a striking battle at range.
Caceres has the tools to beat a ton of guys he's fought if he could just be consistent. Like, that's his thing. I would also, though, I should say, I would not really be that surprised. I'd be a lot less surprised than I should be if Alex Caceres was the first guy to submit Cole Miller. Could totally happen. He's that kind of fighter.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's very talented, and it's just all about him turning up the right way at the right day. And he looked great in his last fight. Like, he really did look like a much better fighter back in
Yeah,
featherweight.
he did. I'm not sure how much I can take away from a win over Masio Fullen.
I know, but I'm just talking about looking at like his footwork and his counters and like
He looked
what
renewed.
he was doing working at range. He looked sharper.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, Miller is the favorite, minus 180 to minus 210. Caceres is the underdog, plus 169 to plus 145. I don't think there's any bets to be got out of that, frankly. I don't think it's a safe fight. I don't think either guy is dependable. Miller has lost. I mean, there's a reason. The idea that Miller can neither comfortably lead nor counter is a big reason that he has lost so many fights.
Yeah.
And Caceres also loses a ton. Like his action submission style is a big reason that he loses a lot. He has gotten submitted a ton, and not, to go with that, he's also less defensively sound than he thinks he is, which is why he gets one punch KO'd by Francisco Rivera. Not that Miller's likely to do
and
that.
he's got the long guy problems too. Like, it's hard for him to recover in time. When he commits, he's got a lot of noodly momentum behind that. Does my mic sound different right now?
Not to me, no.
Okay. Last couple episodes I did, I think my webcam mic was on, and I just changed it to the nice one. So I hopefully it hasn't been like that the whole episode.
All right. That brings us to Jessica Penne, Jessica Andrade. This is a kind of crazy fight, frankly. Andrade is moving down 2 weight classes, and sounds comfortable with it. She did a test cut. Seems to think it was pretty easy. She's short even for straw weight, so I'm not necessarily surprised that it's that easy.
And muscular too, which makes it a little easier.
Yeah, and muscular too. But the big question for her is going to have to be, is she going to be just this beastly powerful straw weight? Because if she's not, she's going to instantly insert herself as one of the least technical fighters, experienced fighters in that division. Like, she's not going to get easy matchups because she's got so much experience. She's going to fight women like Jessica Penne. And Andrade is still, like, she's only 24, and despite having fought since 2011, she still fights like a 24-year-old. She fights like she started 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and is still picking up all the subtleties of the game.
Betch Correia has improved more than Jessica Andrade since debuting in the UFC.
Yeah. Like, her fight with Raquel Pennington was really kind of a, it was kind of a wake-up call, at least as a fan of Andrade, because I'm waiting, I'm like, oh no, I think she's improving and she's consistently getting better. And then she goes out and fights Pennington, and she just looks like she's got the same problems that she.
Granted, it was on short notice, but it was pretty much the exact same fight she fought against Pennington a year and a half before. Except Pennington had gotten better. Yeah, exactly.
So, Penne, it's talk about a hard fight to take anything away from. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, you can't take a lot away from that fight. Andrade is not Joanna. Andrade is not going to technically outstrike Penne bell to bell in the ways that Jędrzejczyk did, and may not out wrestle or out grapple her either. And that's the big thing with Penne, is that her stand up has never gotten beyond clunky. She can throw these okay single strikes, but then she either has to wade in and get hit, or she waits and gets hit, because she doesn't really have the tools of complete natural striking game. And then on the ground, she's a very good, crafty, flowing grappler, but she can get outworked and overpowered by better grapplers. I don't think Andrade can do that. I think Andrade is still too raw. We've seen, she's willing to throw herself into submissions over and over again. She's not trustworthy there to beat Penne, but if Penne can't get her down, or if Penne just gets lit up, that's a real question. I have to pick Penne in this fight just because I think she's still too crafty of that. She's tough as nails.
Yeah.
So the chances of her getting finished are low. And she, even in that Jędrzejczyk fight, there were a couple moments where she was able to jump on Jędrzejczyk and drag her to the ground for brief moments or backpack her. And I think if she does that with Andrade, she gets a win. So I'm picking Penne.
Yeah, it shocked me when I was watching old Penne fights. I watched her bout with Naho Sugiyama, and Mauro Ranallo mentioned was a kickboxer for many years before coming to MMA. I was like, that doesn't seem right. She's not that. I think the thing with Penne is she's one of those fighters who is offensively, if you were a heavy bag that moved around the ring, Penne would look like a pretty solid kickboxer. Her punching mechanics are nice. She can throw good combinations. She's got nice kicks, good knees. But she is so rigid and upright as a striker that without big gloves to hold in front of her face, she is very hittable. Very, very hittable. Fortunately for her, she's absolutely tough as nails, as you mentioned, but she ends up in trouble in fights. She had a very tough fight with Ronda Marcos. I remember that one being slightly controversial, the fact that she won the decision. It was very back and forth. And I think that she's no longer at atom weight. She struggled too on the ground because I think she used to benefit from being so much longer than her opponents, and she's not quite as she doesn't have quite the same advantage at strawweight. The weird thing is she'll have a larger length and height advantage over Andrade, the former bantamweight, than she did over her last three opponents. Andrade is very, very short and very stocky. I like Penne too. I have to see what Andrade looks like at strawweight before I can really rely on her. Even if she says the cut was okay, I still have to have reservations about her crazy, aggressive, nonstop style holding up now that she's dropped 20 pounds of water weight. Mm-hmm. It's just hard to think that she can do the exact same thing that much lighter. And she's so aggressive, I think she'll probably end up walking herself into some of those judo throws that Penne likes. I think she'll probably end up diving into the guard and diving into submissions on the ground the way she did against Marion Renault and the way she did in that third round against Sarah Morris and the way she did against Raquel Pennington. Penne is a very crafty submission artist. She's very opportunistic. I think you've got to bank on that in this fight. Again, another fight in this card that I would not be surprised to see Jessica Andrade win. She could bully Penne on the feet. She's tough. She likes to come in low. She can get under those punches and do some work, but I just think she's a little too reckless in the specific ways that Penne likes to capitalize on. So I go with Penne by submission.
Andrade is one of those fighters. I feel like if she could, if her skills really could click and did, she would instantly be way better.
Yeah.
Like she reminds me in that way of like Francisco Rivera, who I think is, I still hold up as a very underrated fighter, even though he doesn't win a lot. But it was like, for a while he was just this really kind of mediocre brawler, and then things clicked, and he was really a lot better. And I feel like Andrade can have that same thing.
Cub Swanson was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Cub Swanson suddenly like a little more polished, a little more of a strategic focus, and it's like, whoa, this guy's a really good featherweight. I think Andrade could definitely have that, but she just can't keep her head in the game. I'm not sure what it is, but she's just pathologically aggressive
in a way that like it's a young person's aggression. It's an inexperienced aggression. It's just like, no, you threw a triangle on me. Oh, I shucked it. I'm just gonna dive right back in and see if you can get it this time. And then I'm I shucked it again. All right. Well, I'm going to go right back in and try to punch your face again, and you're going to get,
It's a young person's aggression or an old Fedor's aggression.
Yeah.
It's
if she can channel it, she could be a very good fighter.
Yeah.
But she has to channel it, and I haven't seen her do it yet. Next up, Beneil Dariush, James Vick.
Do we have odds for that for Penne Andrade?
Oh, yeah. Odds. Penne is the favorite, minus 141 to minus 160. Andrade plus 133 down to plus 115. I don't see much going on there.
Feels fine.
Yeah.
Dariush Vick, is that me?
Yeah, Dariush Vick is you.
Well, this fight is great and weird in equal measure. James Vick is the Sisyphus of the lightweight division because he finally gets a step up in competition, and it's kind of just another prospect fight. Like, it's kind of just a guy who needs another win, who needs to fight a gatekeeper, and that's James Vick's role. He's been the gatekeeper to the top 15, top 20, or whatever. He's been so reliable that after I felt like I could pick James Vick against any young, undefeated, untested fighter going into that Glyco Franca fight, and he did it. But Beneil Dariush is a different class of young fighter. He has been tested. He's fallen short a couple times. I don't really put too much stock in what happened to Dariush against Chiesa or what happened to him against Ramsey Nijem. It's lightweight. Like, it's just very tough. Even guys like Ramsey Nijem are so much better than the number 30 ranked fighters in most of the other divisions that they're just so dangerous. And then Michael Chiesa, hugely underrated fighter. He's the RNC king, and he got the RNC against Dariush. There's no real shame in that. I do wonder, going into this fight, Beneil Dariush, I think, is a little more technical, but he's also been a little overconfident. And that can be the problem with a guy, with Cordero's guys at Kings MMA, that he's so good at cultivating that confidence, but then how do you convince a guy like Dariush not to press all the advantages you know for certain you have? Against a guy like Chiesa. James Vick is not as technical, but he's extremely game. He doesn't do everything the right way, but he does everything for a reason, and makes him a really dangerous fighter. You know, he knows how to use whatever weird mechanics he has at his disposal to either keep you at range, or to counter you, or to press forward, or to get you in the clinch. He has all of this adaptability that makes him really dangerous. I think the step up in competition that we've been waiting for so long for James Vick is probably not going to favor him against a guy as rock solid technically as Dariush. I just think Dariush does have too many options. And though I thought the same thing going in against Chiesa, I was also willing to acknowledge that Chiesa was really dangerous in a few very specific ways, in a way that James Vick isn't quite. He doesn't have quite that level of killer specialization that Chiesa has. So I definitely think James Vick could win, but I think Beneil Dariush will win.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble with Dariush is going to be going forward that he has the ability to be finished. He's not the toughest guy in the world. Sure. You know, whether it's submissions or knockouts. He's not good. It doesn't mean he's going to get finished all the time. Obviously, he's fought some very good fighters, weathered storms, all that. But that is a big check mark in Vick's favor, is that, like, you basically cannot kill him. He is, you know, like, yeah. He will not go away for anything.
Yeah.
And whenever you have that, sort of like the Chiesa fight, like, you have this question of, like, I know Dariush should win this, but I also know that he can get knocked out by Ramsey Nijem, and Michael Chiesa cannot get knocked out by Ramsey Nijem. Like,
does Dariush feel like a kind of fighter who just in a lot of ways is not, like, physically imposing enough? He's not durable or strong or powerful enough to really hang with the top five in his division. Like, you know, he can go into a lot of fights and be the better fighter and still get, like, is like Wilfredo Benitez, like, amazing defensive technician, so good. You put him against Tommy Hearns, he's still getting knocked out. Like, there's just no way around it for a guy like Dariush. He'd have to fight a perfect fight to beat the top five fighters in this division.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that, like, I was talking about this with Tom yesterday. We were talking about prospects coming up and stuff, and, you know, James Vick and all that, and Dariush. And you actually go back and look at Dariush's submission wins in the UFC. Crookshank, Tony Martin, Charlie Brenneman. If ever there were three dudes that are likely to get submitted, Brenneman being on the better end of that, but he's been, you know, he's lost to the really good submission aces. Basically, Brenneman always gets finished if he's going to lose. But like that's it. Dariush is a very good grappler, but when he's faced really good competition, he's not. It's not Damian Maia out there. He's not locking people down and just ruling their world. In fact, against Michael Johnson, he's not even getting takedowns.
Yeah.
So there's a thing where it's like you're not a knockout artist. You're not getting takedowns or being like hyper controlling at the elite level as a grappler, and you're not the most durable guy in the world.
Yep.
You can't survive at the elite level like that.
A lot of ways to fall short.
Yeah, like essentially once you get to the elite level at lightweight and welterweight and featherweight, there are very few people, almost none, who can consistently survive there without being finishers. Like, you're talking like Jose Aldo. Sure. You have to be this amazing elite technician to survive at that level where you're not getting finishes and consistently winning, because everybody else is so dangerous that if you're just letting them hang around for 15 minutes, you're going to lose fights.
Yeah.
I do not think that's the problem here with Vick. I mean, watching the difference between Dariush Chiesa and Vick versus Glyco Franca for like the first round is completely night and day.
Yeah.
Like, the first thing Dariush comes out and does is like put together a 5-piece combination against Chiesa and, blast him practically off his feet to open the fight. And the first thing that happens to Vick is he gets taken down and like put into half guard and then is scrambling to regain guard against Glyco Franca.
Yeah.
And Vick, he survives on toughness and his ability to be reasonably to stay out of harm's way, even when getting put in bad situations. And he's an opportunist. But Dariush has put so much polish on his game, and Vick himself is generally not a great finisher. Like, he can cinch up the choke if you give him the choke. But otherwise, you're talking decision win over Glyco Franca, decision win over Nick Hine, decision win over Valmir Lazaro. That I don't think it's safe to assume that Vick gets a finish over Dariush. And if he's not finishing Dariush, I cannot see any way he outworks him for a win.
And speaking of tall guy problems, James Vick has him. He, watch that Nick Hine fight. You'll see a compact guy hit a tall dude on the chin because he can't get himself out of range fast enough. Glyco Franca, I think all of them gave him problems where he was just too ungainly. Fortunately, he's
so tentative, and especially early, he tends to be so gun shy that he will just he lets himself get hit because you can see he's kind of panicking, trying to figure out the speed of the fight, and then as he gets comfortable, he gets better. And that goes.
I think
away.
he's wholly an adaptive fighter. He's kind of like a guy like Sean Strickland, except he's not concerned with surviving. He's a tactician who wants to put you away.
Yeah.
And so he adapts more offensively. But in the same way, like, he's always going to be a slow starter because he doesn't. You could game plan for a guy like James Vick extensively, and I think he'd come into every fight not knowing what he really wanted to do until he had a round of seeing his openings.
Yeah. And I don't see that working against Dariush. I don't see it. Dariush is the favorite, minus 175 to minus 215. Vick plus 168 down to plus 145. I would say Dariush could be a bigger favorite, but frankly, Dariush, these questions remain. When you are a guy who's most likely going to win by decision over a lot over good opponents, then it's hard to stack you up really high in the odds.
Most likely to win by decision, most likely to lose by finish. So
yeah, so it's very hard to really stretch those odds out for Dariush a lot longer than that. Mm-hmm. That brings us to Brian Ortega, Clay Guida. I'm going to keep this short and simple because we spend a lot of time on a lot of other fights. Ortega really only is a good grappler. That's it. But he's a very good grappler. Clay Guida gets submitted a lot and is really only a good wrestler, and that's it. It's Brian Ortega by submission.
Yeah. The thing with Brian Ortega, like his game is his grappling game is all open space and counters and attacks. He doesn't really know how to control a guy, or he doesn't care about controlling a guy's posture.
Mm-hmm.
And he also doesn't do that much, I think, to create space. A lot of it is just the guy on top of him tries to posture up and attack. And when he does, Brian Ortega gets him with something. So I do think there's an option here for Clay Guida to just dig his forehead into Brian Ortega's chin on the ground and just sit there. And Brian Ortega will just keep waiting for him to posture up, because that's what most fighters want to do. And Clay Guida, he's looked okay, but, you know, Guida's getting older. Brian Ortega's very young, very dangerous. He's the kind of guy that the UFC would love to promote as a prospect, who will absolutely lose coming up soon. He'll be a Chris Lytle or a Joe Lozon. He'll always be fun to watch, but he will not find consistent success.
He was losing handily to Diego Brandao.
Oh, yeah. That's why I picked Brandao over him, and then I was like, oh, yeah, it's Diego Brandao. This happens.
Yeah, that's why I picked Brian Ortega.
Right. And in the same sense, I would love to pick Clay Guida because I've seen him do this to grapplers before, but also I've seen him get submitted 8 times, and I've seen Brian Ortega get a lot of tricky submissions. So I'm going to go with Brian Ortega by sub as well.
Is it only 8, 4, 5, 6, 7?
Wikipedia says 9 by
8,
submission.
9. Okay, 9. So yeah. Guida gets submitted a lot, and Guida is generally a very active grappler too, like an active wrestler. Like I think I could easily see him just not respecting Ortega at all, because Ortega doesn't fight in a way that makes you respect him.
Like, look at this goofy idiot. He could try to Hioki him, though. You know, he could try to just stall him out, and he could try to ruin Brian Ortega's brand by making him have a boring fight.
This is true. Either way, I'm picking Ortega. Guida, even if he does do that, he's not damaging enough to be a clean winner in many fights.
Yeah, well,
like,
let's recall,
he
didn't deserve the decision over Hioki.
Yeah. Even when he does go that route, he often is either only wrestling or barely winning via a just funky back and forth fight. So I don't think it's safe to pick Guida, even though you can see a way for him to win. All right. Odds on that: Ortega is the favorite, -257 to -295. Clay Guida +241 down to +210. I have no problem with that. I think everybody's seeing the same thing we are, and it's an easy call to make because, like I say, even if Guida does play it safe, he doesn't necessarily do a lot to score points. That brings us to the main card: Dustin Poirier versus Bobby Green.
I love this fight. I'm happy about the return of Bobby Green. Weirdest dude in the lightweight division. Such a bizarre style. Watching him, I kind of came to the conclusion that Bobby Green is a guy who, fighting out of a fairly small gym, I think, at least for many years, came up with a style that was just all of the different pieces he wanted from different styles. So it's like at long range, he'll stand really tall, almost completely square, like a Muay Thai fighter, and then he gets close and he's fighting out of the crab position, that defensive shell, and he's like throwing body jabs, but then he's also in the clinch, like throwing elbows and knees. He just got all of these weird different positions he adopts for different ranges and different things he wants to do. It makes him kind of difficult to deal with, and he also loves to make you look dumb, which those things could be really effective against Dustin Poirier if he still has some of the mental issues he had in the past. Poirier has gotten a little bit heated or a little bit insecure in some of his fights, like in the Conor McGregor fight and in the Cub Swanson fight, and probably in the Chan Sung Jung fight as well. All three of his losses, you could say, he kind of lost his nerve against a guy who was just completely confident scrapping it out with him, and that is Bobby Green. the other thing too, though, is that Bobby Green, normally he throws a lot. That Edson Barboza fight was so weird because I don't know if it was just because Edson Barboza moved so well and hit so hard that Bobby Green could do nothing but defend, or what. But that was a very different Bobby Green. And if it was the power that did it, then I think Dustin Poirier could very much elicit the same response, because Dustin Poirier is still so powerful as a lightweight and possibly more effective with that power, because I don't think he cares anymore about throwing so much that he gets tired. He just goes. And he has shown no difficulty. The pace he fought with Joe Duffy was insane, and he never showed signs of slowing down. So I think Dustin Poirier will probably shut Bobby Green's offense down a bit, force him to go on the defensive. And I think he's a little calmer and more collected than he used to be, which should help him deal with the fact that Bobby Green will stick his tongue out and laugh and shit talk him every time he fails to knock him out. So there's some questions that need to be answered, but I think Dustin Poirier will answer them in a positive.
Yeah, the interesting things for me here will be to see if Bobby Green is willing to play the game he doesn't want to play, which is to be a wrestler. Like, because he is a good wrestler, but that's not what he wants to do. He doesn't want to have to wrestle you. Like, if you're Jacob Volkman and you're just gonna make life miserable on him with this grappling only attack, then Bobby Green will come in and out wrestle you and submit you even. Like, he's got that ability. He's a good, well-rounded fighter. But he would much rather just have a straight boxing match with you if he can force that out of you.
Yeah.
So, in a straight boxing match, I have to go with Poirier. He is much more consistent. Like, he's not as defensively sound, but he's much more consistent. And the thing I really love to see and that I really think could serve him well in this fight was in that Joe Duffy fight was Poirier's clinch offense, his clinch dirty boxing, where he was just, every time he could clinch up with Duffy, he would throw like 4 or 5 quick, powerful uppercuts. Mm-hmm. And Duffy was a better, sharp enough and fast enough and a good enough combination boxer to hurt Poirier really badly consistently. But I don't think Bobby Green is quite that. Bobby Green is he reminds me of like King Mo in some ways.
Sure.
In that, like, you see these technical flashes of his game, but they're they're really inconsistent flashes. And if he can't make those flashes really work for him, it's all about momentum. Like, if he can't get that momentum started, then you see an Edson Barboza fight where it's just always in first gear, always trying to figure out how to get his opponent scared and to get them to get in their head.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the theme of this whole card, is that there are tons of fighters who would need to fight a perfect fight to beat their opponent. Like, they're not going to put their opponent away. At least it's very unlikely that they're going to hurt them badly. And so they need to throw a lot of volume and not get hit cleanly for 3 rounds in a row. And it's just a tall order.
Yeah. And like with Poirier, you can get in his head, but I don't think that Green quite has the right. He doesn't quite have the right combination to do that. Like, it, he doesn't have what Conor McGregor has.
He's not gonna like hurt you and then laugh at you for being hurt. He's going to pretend he's not hurt and laugh at you for not hurting him. It's a little different.
Yeah, and I don't think that gets. I don't think that's going to get to Poirier, because Poirier will just keep pouring it on you. He will just keep marching. If he's hitting you, then his confidence is not going to be broken. So, yeah, I got to pick Poirier. He just seems like he's got the right style. And the other part of this is, too, Green's been out for 2 years, and things have been rough on him in that time. He's had injuries. He's had some family losses before then, and I know he spent some time couch surfing because he was fearing for his life. And
my secret hope is that it was a bunch of injuries catching up to him in the Edson Barboza fight, and then he was injured, and that maybe time off will have helped him, and he'll come back more the old Bobby Green. But it's just a hope.
Yeah, but he's also been fighting since. Well, he's been fighting since 2008, so it's not so long. But
yeah, he's 29. He's got time left.
Yeah, he's got time left. He's right in the middle of he's right at the height of his career right now. So hopefully he comes back much like his old self. But anytime a fighter spends 2 years on the sidelines, I just kind of have to say I don't know what to expect. And if you do know what to expect, you're lying.
Yeah, most of them are not Dominick Cruz.
Yeah, or like sometimes, like we saw this last week where we had a couple fighters came back really well. Was it Rick Story?
Rick Story,
great.
2-year layoff, yeah.
And Eric Koch looked great. Like they both looked phenomenal.
Sometimes they're rejuvenated. Sometimes they have ring rust. It's just impossible to know until they step in there.
You just can't know, and I'm not going to depend on it. So Poirier, I think, is a safe pick here. Doesn't mean he'll absolutely win, but I wouldn't bet on Bobby Green. Poirier is the favorite, -200 to -235. Green, the underdog, +186 down to +160. I also don't know that there's a lot to be got out of those odds.
No, I don't think so. I have no issue with them. I think they're pretty much spot on.
Yeah. And that brings us to Dan Henderson, Hector Lombard. And I think this is my fight to lead off. So, man, Hector Lombard is going to knock Dan Henderson out in the first round.
Yep.
And that's all there is to it. I keep hearing these murmurings like, oh, Post, you saw the Hector Lombard. We all saw what happened last time. No, we saw Hector Lombard look exactly the fucking same. He just fought a good enough fighter to actually weather that storm and then come back and beat him. And Dan Henderson
saw Hector Lombard almost murder a man in the first round before getting very nearly murdered himself. Dan Henderson is not the kind of guy who can take that shellacking and come back to repay it.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
There's a small part of me has the Tim Boach fears here, which is that realization that the only way for Lombard to win is to march right into the pocket and right into Dan Henderson's right hand.
But even then, how often does a guy like Tim Boach get knocked out with one punch? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like even then, and Hector Lombard much faster, better defensively than Tim Boach, and probably much more powerful even.
Yeah, so we've both covered this. The odds on this fight, Dan Henderson is the underdog, +336 to +300. Hector Lombard, -370 to -440. If you are feeling extra savvy, Lombard inside the distance, under 1.5 rounds is -190.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. That even if Dan Henderson finds a way to win, it is going to be via first round KO, which has pretty much never happened to Lombard. So
it's both guys' first round KO is like the likely route. So
a -190 bet on under 1.5 rounds is probably the best bet you can get on that. That brings us to Max Holloway, Ricardo Lamas featherweight fight. I like this fight a lot. Connor, take it away.
Me too. I think I like the way they are dealing with Max Holloway. He's actually getting a chance to make gradual steps up in competition. Though the two things that Ricardo Lamas offers Max Holloway that he has not had to deal with in the past. One, he's a very savvy finisher. We've talked about Ricardo Lamas over and over. He's kind of our archetype for this type of fighter. Yep. He's the opportunist. That's his thing. If he finds an opening or if you give him an opening, he will jump on it and he will put you away. And that extends to ground and pound. It extends to strikes in the feet, and it definitely extends to submissions. He's also, the other thing I really like about this is that I think he is probably the best wrestler, the best offensive wrestler Max Holloway's faced in this whole 8-fight winning streak he's on right now. Holloway's takedown defense has looked very solid, but really the best wrestler he's faced, Andre Feely, maybe Charles Oliveira. Jeremy
Probably
Stevens,
Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, Jeremy Stevens didn't really go for any takedowns. He hasn't faced a ton of great takedown artists. And so that's Ricardo Lamas. He's not the kind of guy who will like blow you away with a blast double. He's not Chad Mendez, but he will drag you down in the clinch. He will work a single leg and rip you off your feet. He can do those things very well. So it's an opportunity to see how Max Holloway deals with the guy who will likely be determined to take him down and will have the skill set to do so. At range, I think it would be crazy not to say that Max Holloway has the edge. He is turned into, not only is he a very exciting, very capable finisher at long range, but he has turned into a very reliably good outfighter. He can control you. He can stick you on the end of his jab, but he can also go forward behind a crazy Street Fighter combo, changing stances and throwing and spinning strikes. He can basically do it all. He is kind of the boxer puncher in this division. Very well-rounded, all-terrain striker. I think as long as Ricardo Lamas hangs out at distance with Max Holloway, he's going to be losing this fight. When it gets into the clinch, it's going to be a lot more interesting. I think Max Holloway will be able to negate him there. I don't know, which is part of the reason I like this matchup so much, but I think he will. And if he can, then this is Max's fight to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I was going back and watching Lamas' last fight with Diego Sanchez, and Lamas has slowly tuned up his striking game over time, but it's still very fundamentally like you saw. He starts the fight with like 4 unset up kicks, and then Diego Sanchez finally blasts him for one because at some point he's going to, and from there on, Lamas switches to big single strikes, which are reasonably technical, but they're all like, rear uppercut, rear straights, overhand. Like it's never, and it's all one at a time, and it's never set up with anything else. Like there's nothing that gets built around it.
Lamas is a smart guy with a kick-heavy striking game, and so like we saw what a kick-heavy striking game can do to you if you're not smart about it. When Aljamain Sterling fought Brian Caraway, you get really tired because it takes a lot of energy.
Yep.
But that's also the problem. Like Ricardo Lamas is smart enough not to waste his energy, which means he's just throwing single strikes with a lot of space between.
Yep. And Holloway, I kind of feel like obviously Stevens is a more dangerous puncher, a better quick trigger puncher and kicker even than Lamas. Like yes. I think, Stevens isn't as opportunistic and isn't the finisher that Lamas is, weirdly. But Stevens is a better opportunistic, or is just not a better opportunistic, but a cleaner striker.
He's a more dangerous striker who doesn't have the discipline to finish all the guys he hurts.
Yeah, exactly. And when Holloway fought Stevens, he's once again out at range against somebody looking just to throw these big single strikes. And Holloway had no trouble keeping that fight safe and unengaged the whole time and just negating everything Stevens wanted to do on the feet. Now, it didn't end up being an interesting fight because of that, but it also shows, I think Holloway can do enough of the thing that gives Lamas the biggest problem, and is the reason that Lamas continually is going to hit a wall at the elite level, which is that he doesn't give opportunities. Holloway does not give his opponents opportunities to beat him. They have to take them or create them. And Ricardo Lamas, you actually go back and look at the guys that he's beating, and some of them are very, very good fighters. Like, a lot of them are very good fighters.
Yeah.
But Diego Sanchez, Dennis Bermudez, Hakran Diaz, who just... But Diego Sanchez, Dennis Bermudez, Eric Koch, Hatsu Hioki, Cub Swanson, Matt Grice, Dave Jansen, James Krause, all of these fighters are aggressive fighters that will give you big openings.
They're the kind of fighters who get finished.
Yeah. They will, whether it's through aggressive striking or aggressive grappling or whatever, they will go after their opponent and give that opponent an opportunity to finish them. And that's, Lamas thrives there. When you give him those openings, he will beat you. I kind of take Hakran Diaz off that list because he doesn't give you openings, but he also doesn't create any offense at all, which is why
he also almost beat Lamas.
He almost beat Lamas. Like, I actually thought he did, and he took Lamas to a decision just because he does not give any openings.
Yeah.
And Holloway doesn't. Like I said, watching that Stevens fight, he gave Stevens absolutely nothing. And if he gives Lamas nothing, then I don't see Lamas getting anything done.
Spot on.
So, odds on that fight, Holloway is the favorite, minus 300 up to minus 370. Lamas, the underdog, plus 274 down to minus 225, or to plus 274 down to plus 225. I'm fine with that. I actually think those could be a little bit longer. Obviously, Lamas is such a great opportunist that it's really hard to just say, oh, he's got no shot. But if Holloway fights a safe fight, it's hard to see how he loses.
Yeah, Lamas is the guy in the top 5 who loses to the other people in the top 5.
Yep.
Like, he keeps everybody else from getting there, but he loses when he fights the guys who are really good because they just don't offer him those openings. And I agree with your assessment completely. I don't think Max Holloway is that kind of guy.
Yeah, Holloway might lose to the other guys in the top 5 just because he may suffer from that same problem we were talking about with like being a young fighter coming up and never quite developing the right game to hit the elite. He seems like he's really broken through a level at times, but he also has that fight like the Jeremy Stevens fight where it's just kind of like, well, he won and he won handily, but he also did nothing to hurt Jeremy Stevens.
That's probably the right thing to do against Jeremy Stevens.
It's true. It is. It just it makes me a little. It makes me a little weird then thinking about like Chad Mendez or Jose Aldo, where it's like if you're not going to do something to hurt them, they will be able to find ways to hurt you. Mm-hmm. But still, I don't see that being a problem here. That brings us to the co-main event: Dominick Cruz, Urijah Faber. This is a I don't know. This is a fight that is happening, and I understand why it's happening. But despite having spent all this time talking about all these fights, I cannot get myself excited to break this down because I basically just feel like Faber is getting slower and more predictable, especially as a striker. He's really at his best. He's the place that he's retained the best of his abilities are as a grappler. And that's the place he's least likely to get even a second of this fight. And he's fighting Dominick Cruz, who still looks like Dominick Cruz. I mean, I did not think Dominick Cruz would still look like Dominick Cruz. I like Dominick Cruz of old. I don't necessarily know. I'm a little confounded by some of the love he's getting now because he's still the same fighter he was when he was hated.
Yeah. It was a little weird.
But I think this has only become a better fight for him over time, and it's only like it was a bad fight for him the first time. It was a good fight for him the second time, and it's a great fight for him the third time, and that's it.
It's a little strange that I think a lot of the same people who hate Demetrius Johnson love Dominick Cruz.
Yes.
Who is, I think, even more focused on defense and on just like making you look bad rather than actually beating you up. He does it really well. Like Dominick Cruz is the grade A slickster for MMA. He is so defensively savvy. He didn't just come back and still look like Dominick Cruz. He looked better than he used to look.
Yeah, he did. It was the best performance of his career, even if at the time I didn't think he won. Paul made a very convincing analytical breakdown of going by judging tendencies. There's basically no way that TJ Dillashaw was going to win that Dominick Cruz fight. Yeah.
But, going by scoring criteria, I think that TJ Dillashaw won the fight. I thought he won 3 rounds because defense is not a scoring criterion, and making a guy miss doesn't make you win the fight. Judges love it, though, and as do fans. So most people think Cruz won, regardless of how I thought the decision should have gone. It was a beautiful performance from both guys. Cruz came back, like, even especially given the circumstances, Cruz having fought like once in 4 years before that fight, and to come back against someone who I think was the best fighter he ever faced and put on that kind of show was pretty astounding. And so that's where Cruz is at right now. He's the guy who beat Faber, but markedly better. And Urijah Faber is kind of the guy who fought Cruz, but 5 years older. You know, it's just hard to see how Urijah Faber can hurt Cruz badly enough on the feet or create the kind of scramble that favors him enough to wrap up a finish. And it is virtually unthinkable to imagine Urijah Faber winning a decision. I just don't see how he can win 3 rounds off of this version of Dominick Cruz. I have recently been thinking about how much more I should appreciate Urijah Faber. You know, like, he's not very likable. Casual fans love him, but for like people who have to listen to him talk a lot in the community, he's not very likable. And I don't know. I tend to like not like fighters who are like all dynamicism with very little technique or process. That's why I don't enjoy John Dotson's fights very much, because it just frustrates me. But Urijah Faber is 37 years old, and he is still undeniably a top bantamweight. And he has been a top bantamweight or a top featherweight for almost his entire career, and he's still doing it. And it would not surprise me at all that after he loses to Dominick Cruz, which I think he will, if he goes and beats several other top 10 bantamweights, he's really good. You know, Urijah Faber is a very good fighter. He has his game. It's kind of predictable, but most fighters on earth are not good enough to stop it. Dominick Cruz, on the other hand, is. So I like Dominick Cruz by decision. And that's that. I've tried to be positive. I'm trying now to not to think of this as a weird and interesting card that ends in 2 very predictable title fights. Instead, I'm going to think of it as probably the last chance for 2 of the best old fighters in the UFC to get their title shots. So,
yeah, I will. I mean, this is the thing that I will say too, though, is that as a longtime person who favors champions getting easy title challengers to keep them busy, I have no problem with either of these. Like, no, I would much rather see an active champion who is facing whoever's around and willing than I would seeing the champion fight 2 times a year because the UFC wants to only match him up against the hardest possible guy, and any other fight, if the fight falls through, they're not going to give him a fight.
Sure, and I totally, from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, both of these fights make more sense than any other fight possible in the division. Michael Bisping is not only the highest ranked available guy, he is the most interesting middleweight. Like, that's just all there is to it. Urijah Faber is the only guy anyone outside the MMA community cares about in the bantamweight division. Why not make these fights? It makes total sense. And when TJ Dillashaw, if he gets his win over Rafael Assunção in the rematch, I'm so down to watch Cruz versus Dillashaw too. That was probably one of my favorite fights of all time, and I'm so down to watch that fight again. It'll still happen, even if Dillashaw should have gotten the immediate rematch. Faber Cruz makes sense.
So on that note, Cruz is the favorite, minus 350 to minus 650. Urijah Faber plus 443 down to plus 325 or 250 to down to plus 250. Frankly, Dominick Cruz at minus 350. Like, I gotta think that this is like, there has to be some willful betting, like some like, no, I think Faber won the second fight. No, I think Faber's in his head betting out there. Because
if your betting book happens to be Sports International, I'm guessing, that is the only one with such a low line on Cruz, and I would say snatch that shit up, because most of the other lines here do reflect the reality of this fight.
This feels like a 700-800 fight to me.
Sure, yeah.
That's what it feels like. I got to say, like, when, Urijah Faber is right up there next to Vitor Belfort for dudes that I really don't want to see fight for titles anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, you're getting this because you're a notable name, but you're not contending. I'd much rather see, like I said, I mean, my whole argument for like champions getting relatively the occasional easy contender is really to get new guys up there too, to like throw some dude who's on a win streak in the moment into a title shot, and like, what can you do with this? Like OSP fighting John Jones, that makes me really happy. Because when the fuck is OSP going to fight for a title?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, what other excuse are you going to have for OSP versus John Jones?
Exactly. And it gives John Jones a win. It gave him a chance to kind of get back in and do some work. And I'm very happy for that. So, but to just see guys getting retreaded over and over, that always bugs me a little. So I'm a little... I don't know. The odds aren't close, but they're closer than they should be.
I do think, I mean, the fight with the second fight with Cruz, it wasn't as one-sided as we remember it. Urijah Faber, He definitely had his moments.
He did.
Cruz, I think, is a lot less open than he was then. He's not going to give Faber those chances to land that right hand. But still, like, Urijah Faber can totally win a round or two from Dominick Cruz just through, like, landing the flashier shots or...
Yeah.
in a good position or two. It could totally happen. Cruz is so focused on defense that he can give away rounds.
But Faber barely squeaked out a fight against Frankie Saenz.
Yeah, how can you? It's just hard. Like, the fight feels so one-sided, not because Urijah Faber's not good, but because, like, again, he feels like pretty much the same guy who fought Cruz, but 5 years older and noticeably
slower.
Noticeably slower. He's just not quite the same guy he was. His style is the same. His body is not.
Yep. That brings us to the main event. Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping. Bisping seems to be... this is you. Talk about it. I won't jump all over it.
This one I actually have a lot easier time getting behind than Cruz Faber 3.
Yes,
it's easy because it's Michael Bisping. Like, he never got a shot at the title, and it's fair he never got a shot. He never beat the guy that would have gotten him that shot. But he's on a very solid 3-fight winning streak right now. I thought the controversy about the Anderson Silva decision was, I guess I understood it, but I think Michael Bisping deserved to win that fight. I mean, I understood how maybe the fight should have been stopped, I guess. But, like, just because you decide the guy's done, the fighter doesn't get to decide that. Referee never called it off. Round ended. Michael Bisping, he worked his ass off in that fight. It was a classic Michael Bisping fight. I think technically Michael Bisping is in the best form of his entire career. He is not quite the nonstop perpetual motion machine he once was. He has looked more tired in the later rounds. I think the last against Talaslitis, against Anderson Silva, and against Kung Lee, the last 3 times I've seen him go into main event or championship rounds, he has looked tired more than I remember him looking earlier in his career. And so he has that going against him, but, like, technically speaking, he has a deeper toolkit. Pat and I had a massive argument about this in Heavy Hands because I said that physical disparity is, like, the biggest narrative for me going into this fight, by which, of course, I don't mean to say that Luke Rockhold only wins because he's a physical specimen. But in this matchup, it's very clear that Luke Rockhold is a physical specimen and Michael Bisping is not. Tom suggested to me that a good way to make my argument would be to say that if these two guys both taught a seminar on striking and ringcraft, of course you would pay for Michael Bisping's seminar because he would have a lot more to show you. And in a pure style matchup, 2 technicians with these skill sets, if there were 2 Michael Bispings, one of whom happened to have Luke Rockhold's skill set, then it would be a very competitive fight. But the thing is like, again, Michael Bisping would have to fight the perfect fight for 5 rounds because he can't put Luke Rockhold away. He just doesn't hit hard enough. He can't avoid being hit by this big, dynamic, powerful guy, or he can't avoid being put in his back. Like, if he has to go strength for strength, power for power at any point in this fight, he's going to lose that battle badly. And he almost lost that battle 2 or 3 times against an Anderson Silva who really only fought him for like 7 minutes of the full 25. And
that's generous. That's generous.
Sure. And Luke Rockhold's not going to do that. Now, Bisping did a better job than ever of getting in his face, of taking angles, of controlling the distance, of throwing combinations. But, like, Michael Bisping's not going to – the chances of Michael Bisping doing that and hurting you in the first round of a fight, especially if you're Luke Rockhold, is so slim that you just can't. There is a part of me that would be so happy if Michael Bisping went out and, like, one shot knocked out Luke Rockhold. It would be the greatest thing. It would be the
Yes.
greatest thing. It would be the biggest upset. I don't care what the odds say. It would be the biggest upset in MMA history if that happened. And I would love it so much. But it is absolutely not going to happen. And it would only be so great because I'm so certain it's not going to happen. So it's Luke Rockhold. It's going to look very similar to their first fight, in which, yes, Michael Bisping had his moments. He looked okay at range, but once something dramatic happened, of course, it was Luke Rockhold who made it happen, and he quickly finished the fight. Same thing happens here.
Yeah, I mean, I would even, like going back to Rockhold Weidman, there were a lot of moments, technique for technique, when the two of them were fighting, where Weidman performed a lot better than Luke Rockhold.
Yeah. Pat has the opinion that Rockhold is like a technician supreme as well as being a physical specimen. I think he has a lot of work to do technically. I really do. Like, he's got a lot of holes. The
biggest thing I will give Rockhold credit for that I really did not give him nearly enough credit for, and that was a massive difference maker in that Weidman fight, is just how sharp Rockhold's counter hooks are.
That right hook is a killer.
Yeah. And that's the thing that, like, because of his range and his speed and his power and his ability to time that thing, like, it is a massive difference changer. He shut down so much of Weidman's offense just because Weidman realized, I can't come forward and throw strikes, because the moment I do, I'm going to get hit really hard.
Yeah, he would just wrap that shit right around the back of your head the moment you lunge in.
And that spells disaster for Bisping, because Bisping has to work at range and keep a high work rate. He has to keep a high work rate, and that means counters. Like, that means that counter is coming back at him really hard. And what we saw in the Anderson Silva fight was, his movement was better than ever before. I do think that, Bisping, technically, he's doing a better job than he has ever done. Like, if he fought like this 5 years ago, he probably would have earned that title shot 5 years ago.
Yeah, he looked fantastic, like coming in, rolling under Anderson Silva's punches, putting his combinations together and taking angles while he did it. He looked really sharp in the first 3 rounds of that Anderson Silva fight.
But a part of that, too, in that fight was that Anderson Silva does not pull the trigger anymore.
No.
So even when Anderson Silva was getting opportunities to counter, when Bisping was leaving himself open to be countered, there was nothing coming back at him. Anderson Silva was just feinting and waiting. And, we've talked about this before, but the Anderson Silva we saw in his fight against Stephan Bonner, like, that was the beginning of realizing Anderson Silva is no longer a guy who can take every opportunity you give him.
Yeah, Pat's theory is that the Anderson Silva who fought Talis Leitis was already past his prime and was just like, you hadn't caught on because nobody was like, that's why he started clowning, is what Pat thinks, because he couldn't go out there and fight as much as he used to. Remember how tired he got when he fought Damian Maia? He got real tired. He got really tired. Remember how inactive he was when he fought Chael Sonnen?
But that Maia fight, it was also like 110 degrees.
Sure. But I think you could argue that Anderson Silva was just so crafty, nobody realized. I mean, most people didn't even think that he looked off in the Stephan Bonner fight, where you and I both agree he was definitely not the same guy.
Yeah, and so, as those fights have gone forward, he's been able to pull the trigger less and less and less, to the point that you got to this Bisping fight where he is just getting absolutely outworked for almost every minute of the fight until he hurts Bisping. And he couldn't hurt him often enough. And I don't see Rockhold suffering from any of that kind of problem. Even if Bisping comes in and is craftier, Rockhold is much more willing to pull the trigger at any opportunity. That's why his counters and his hooks are so devastating. It's because you think about feinting to throw the punch and the counter is already coming. Like,
yeah.
He will pull the trigger at any moment that he thinks he has the opportunity to.
And just like his physique, like, you have such a high target to aim for. He likes to pull his head back and sit back, so it's far away, it's high up. You're gonna have to reach for his head. And like, the best you could do is get Rockhold to throw the counter and be ready for it, and then counter him. but like there's just no way to not have him throw that right hook at the side of your head as you come forward.
Yep. And Bisping, if anything, has been eminently predictable about eating right hands.
Yep, that's his thing.
Yeah. So there's no picking Bisping here. It should be. I'm glad to see it. I'm glad Bisping is getting his shot. I don't care. It's a rematch. I don't expect it to go differently. But this is the kind of title shot that makes me happy. I am happy to see. Like, I'm happy to see I'd much rather see Rockhold fight Bisping than wait for Jacare to be healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely. I'd love to see Rockhold in action. I'd love to see Bisping get a shot. And it's a win-win. Like, I don't like either of these guys. I like Michael Bisping more just because I've seen him for so long, but also it never saddens me to see Michael Bisping lose because he's a dick. And Luke Rockhold's definitely a dick, so if Michael Bisping upsets him, it'll be the greatest thing on earth.
Bisping's own kids root against him. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to win? That's Bisping's son's reaction to him asking for some familial support. So, yeah, it's a win-win. Like it's fine. This fight is totally fine. It's whatever. It just feels like the unfortunate thing is that for us fans or us pundits or whatever you want to call us people in the bubble, the main and co-main just feel like letdowns, even though they're totally fine fights. They just feel like letdowns because, like, we've seen them.
You know what I'm really hoping for is for Dominick Cruz to finish Urijah Faber. I would love to see that happen.
That would be nice.
And I think it could.
It could, but man, Urijah Faber, man.
I know. He's tough. He's been doing well. He's been around forever, but he's losing steps. And I would love to see that happen. And that would make everything okay. Like, not that I necessarily hate Faber, but nothing takes away the taste of watching a dude get his 9th title shot, and in a fight that's eminently predictable than actually having it not go the distance.
Yes. Yeah. Like there was nothing worse than Faber going, Faber's first fight with Renan Barão. So dull. Like just 5 rounds of him just not getting anything done, but being too tough to finish. That was not fun to watch.
Yeah. Odds on this Bisping fight. Bisping is the underdog, plus 600 down to plus 490. Luke Rockhold, the favorite, minus 475 up to minus 937. So those are the odds that I feel more like should be on the Cruz Faber fight, but they're fine. Either way, let's see, under 1.5 rounds is minus 115. Not saying, like, Bisping is tough. He is. But I don't know if there's any chance bet to be made here. That's a
tough one, because I could also see this totally going just over 1.5 rounds. Like,
I know, me too. Like,
pretty sure it did last time. Like, even if it's a finish, it's like late 2nd round. I can definitely see that.
I know. But I'm just saying, if you're looking for, like, a chance bet, the Rockhold, like, under 1.5 rounds, or fight won't start round 3 is minus 205. How's that?
It's all right.
Yeah, there's not really, like, it's a predictable fight, but everybody seems to know it's predictable, so there's not really a lot of value to be gotten.
Like, Michael Bisping could come out there and be like, all right, I didn't have my full training camp. I'm just going to go nuts and hope something insane happens. But he could also go out there and say, man, Rockhold got kind of tired. He got a little sleepy in that Weidman fight. Maybe I will just play the safest fight of my career, in which case it could totally go Bisping losing 3 rounds and getting hurt in the 4th. That could absolutely happen.
Yep. Anyway, any other picks, tips, odds, things that you're looking at?
There's a couple. I like let's see, who did I like? I like Strickland maybe for a small bet over Breese as an underdog. I like a small thing on Luis Enrique da Silva. Kevin Elvis Mutapcic is not much of a favorite, which is a little nuts to me. And there are a couple others. Oh, and I like Hector Lombard, Dan Henderson under 1.5 rounds. I definitely like that.
Yeah. So that wraps us up. Thank you for joining us and tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at DZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. You can find both of us over on BloodyElbow.com. Give this video a like. That's a thumbs up. Subscribe to MMANation.com, DOTCOM, over on YouTube. Both those things really help us a lot. We will have, we'll be doing a sixth round after the fights, and then we'll have Knuckle Up and all our shows. Actually, I don't think there's a fight card next week, so we won't have all of our normal shows, or all of our fight-centered shows for next week. As no
McDonald
fight.
Thompson is on the 18th. It's a hell of a card, though.
So we'll be getting geared up for that slowly, but we'll still have Knuckle Up and If I Did It and the prospectus and all that good stuff. Heavy hands coming at you. So stay tuned for that, and thanks everyone for tuning in.